Mathew Richard sat in his home office, staring at the security camera footage on his computer screen. His jaw was tight, his hands forming fists on the desk. There she was again, Jessica Martins, his new nanny, walking out the back door of his Dallas mansion with 2 heavy grocery bags slung over her shoulders. The timestamp read 6:47 p.m. I knew it, he thought. She's a thief. But before I tell you what happened next, I need to know who's watching this right now. Comment down below what time it is and where you're watching from. Are you in New York, London, Tokyo, Los Angeles? Let me know in the comments. I want to see how far this story reaches around the world. Now let me take you back to the beginning. For 3 weeks now, Mathew had been watching Jessica. At first, everything seemed perfect. She was great with his kids, Lily and Lucas. They loved her. They laughed with her. For the first time in 3 years, there was joy in his house again. But Mathew had learned the hard way that perfection was always an illusion. Everyone had secrets. Everyone betrayed you eventually. Mathew Richard was a billionaire. At 42 years old, he had built a tech empire worth $3 billion. He owned a mansion in Highland Park, one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in Dallas, Texas. He had cars, private jets, investments in companies all over the world. People envied him. They thought he had everything, but none of it mattered. None of it could bring back what he had lost 3 years ago on a rainy California highway. His wife, Catherine. The accident happened so fast. A drunk driver ran a red light at 70 miles per hour. A 4-car pileup followed. Metal twisted. Glass shattered. Catherine's car flipped 3 times and burst into flames. Mathew got the call while he was in a business meeting in San Francisco. His assistant's face went pale as she handed him the phone. By the time he reached the hospital in Los Angeles, Catherine was barely alive. The doctors said a paramedic had pulled her from the burning wreckage, risking his own life to save her. The car was seconds away from exploding. The flames were so intense that the paramedic suffered severe burns on his arms and inhaled toxic smoke that damaged his lungs. But he didn't stop. He broke the window, cut through the seatbelt, and dragged Catherine out just before the gas tank exploded. That paramedic gave Mathew 10 precious minutes to hold his wife's hand and say goodbye before the machines stopped beeping. 10 minutes to tell her he loved her. 10 minutes to kiss her forehead one last time. 10 minutes to promise her he would take care of their children. After Catherine died, Mathew couldn't stay in California. Every street reminded him of her. Every restaurant where they had shared a meal. Every park where they had watched the kids play. Every sunset they had watched together from their balcony. The memories were suffocating him. He packed up his 2 young children, 7-year-old Lily and 5-year-old Lucas, and moved to Texas. He bought the biggest mansion he could find, hoping that a new city and a fresh start would heal the wound. But grief doesn't work that way. You can change your address, but you can't change what's inside you. You can buy a new house, but you can't buy peace. The pain followed him to Dallas like a shadow. Mathew became cold, distant. He stopped smiling. He stopped going to Lily's school events. He stopped playing with Lucas in the backyard. He buried himself in work, spending 18 hours a day in his home office, making deals and building his fortune. But no amount of money filled the emptiness inside him. Worse than the grief was the paranoia. Mathew stopped trusting people. He suspected everyone had ulterior motives. The business partners who wanted to collaborate with him. The neighbors who invited him to dinner parties. Even the nannies he hired to take care of his children. In 2 years, he had hired and fired 5 nannies. The first one was too friendly with the neighbors. Mathew thought she was gossiping about his family. The second one asked too many personal questions. Mathew was convinced she was planning to sell stories about him to the tabloids. The third one let the kids watch too much television. The fourth one didn't follow his strict schedule exactly. The fifth one smiled too much, and Mathew decided she was fake. He found fault in everyone because trusting people meant risking pain, and he had already experienced enough pain for a lifetime. His kids suffered because of it. Lily stopped talking about her day at school because Daddy was always too busy. Lucas stopped asking him to play because Daddy always said no. Then Jessica Martins walked into his life. She was 32 years old, born and raised in Dallas. She came from a working-class neighborhood in East Dallas where people knew the value of hard work and sacrifice. She didn't have fancy credentials from expensive European nanny schools. She didn't have a degree in child psychology from Harvard. Her resume was simple. She had worked at a daycare for 5 years. She had been a teacher's aide at an elementary school. She had glowing references from families she had babysat for. During the interview, she sat across from Mathew in his massive office. The room was intimidating with its floor-to-ceiling windows, expensive art on the walls, and a desk that probably cost more than most people's cars. Jessica looked nervous but sincere. Her clothes were simple but clean, a plain white blouse and black pants, no designer labels, no flashy jewelry, just a small silver cross on a chain around her neck. Mathew grilled her with questions for over an hour. Why do you want this job? What's your experience with children who have lost a parent? How do you handle discipline? What would you do in an emergency? Do you have any criminal record? Can you provide references? Why did you leave your last job? Jessica answered every question honestly. She never got defensive. She never tried to impress him with fake credentials or exaggerated experience. When Mathew asked her the final question, "Why should I hire you?" she looked him straight in the eyes and said something that stuck with him. "I want to help," she said softly. "Children deserve to feel safe and loved, Mr. Richard. Your kids have been through something terrible. They lost their mother. They need someone who will show up every day and make them feel like the world isn't such a scary place. I can't replace their mother. Nobody can. But I can give them stability, kindness, and attention. I promise I'll give them that." Something in her voice made him believe her. Maybe it was the sincerity in her eyes. Maybe it was desperation because he needed help and was running out of options. Maybe it was exhaustion from interviewing dozens of candidates. Against his better judgment, he hired her. The first week was magical. Jessica didn't just watch Lily and Lucas, she engaged with them. She got down on the floor and played with them. She asked them about their feelings. She listened when they talked about their mother. She didn't try to replace Catherine or pretend the grief didn't exist. She acknowledged it and helped them process it in healthy ways. She braided Lily's hair every morning and told her she looked like a princess. She helped Lucas with his puzzles and celebrated with him when he finished one. She read them bedtime stories with funny voices that made them giggle so hard they could barely breathe. She made them healthy snacks after school. She took them to the park and pushed them on the swings. She helped them with homework. She tucked them into bed and told them they were loved. For the first time since their mother died, the children seemed truly happy. Their laughter filled the mansion. The house felt warm again instead of cold and empty. Lily started smiling more. Lucas stopped having nightmares. But Mathew didn't smile. He watched from a distance. He analyzed every interaction. He reviewed the security camera footage every night, looking for red flags. He waited for Jessica to make a mistake. He waited for her to reveal her true intentions, because in his experience, people always did. In week 2, the questions started. Jessica began asking about Catherine. She approached Mathew one afternoon while he was working in his office. "Mr. Richard, can I ask you something?" she said hesitantly. "What is it?" Mathew replied without looking up from his laptop. "I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit about your wife. What was she like? The kids mention her sometimes, and I want to make sure I'm helping them in the right way." Mathew's fingers stopped typing. He looked up at her, his eyes cold. "Why do you need to know about my wife?" he asked, his tone sharp. Jessica looked startled. "I'm sorry, Mr. Richard. I just thought if I understood more about their mother, I could help them process their grief better. Sometimes Lily talks about her, and I want to make sure I'm saying the right things." "That's not your job," Mathew said coldly. "Your job is to watch them, feed them, keep them safe, not to psychoanalyze them. If they need therapy, I'll hire a therapist." Jessica's face flushed with embarrassment. "Of course, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to overstep." She left the office quickly, and Mathew went back to his work. But in his mind, he marked it as red flag number 1. Why was she so curious about Catherine? Was she planning to write a book about his family? Was she going to sell the story to a magazine? He made a mental note to watch her more carefully. Then in week 3, the food started disappearing. At first, Mathew thought maybe the kids were eating more. Growing children have big appetites, but when he checked the pantry one evening, he noticed clear gaps on the shelves. Cans of soup were missing. boxes of pasta, bags of rice, protein shakes, even medical supplements he kept in the back cabinet for his own use. He asked the housekeeper if she had moved anything. She said no. He asked the cook if he had used more ingredients than usual. The cook said no. That left only one person, Jessica. Mathew went to his office and pulled up the security footage. He scrolled through hours of video until he found what he was looking for. There it was, clear as day. Every evening at around 6:30, after the kids were in bed and the cook had left for the day, Jessica would go into the kitchen. She would open the pantry and carefully select items: canned goods, bread, vegetables, protein powder. She would pack them into her large shoulder bag, looking around nervously to make sure no one was watching. Then she would zip the bag closed, sling it over her shoulder, and leave through the back door. Mathew watched the footage 3 times to make sure he wasn't mistaken, but there was no doubt. Jessica Martins was stealing from him. He felt rage building inside him, not because of the monetary value of the food. He was a billionaire. He could buy 100 grocery stores without feeling it in his bank account, but because she had seemed so genuine, so pure, so trustworthy, she had looked him in the eyes and promised to take care of his children, and all along she was a thief. How could he have been so stupid? How could he have trusted her? He had let his guard down, and this was what happened. He felt like a fool. For 3 days, Mathew watched the footage obsessively. Every single evening, Jessica took food. Sometimes it was just a few items. Other times, her bag looked so heavy she could barely carry it. Bread, canned goods, vegetables, expensive organic items he had specially ordered from Whole Foods. She was stealing from him right under his nose, and she had the audacity to act innocent while doing it. On the 4th day, Mathew made a decision. He would follow her after work. He would see where she was taking the stolen goods. Maybe she was selling them. Maybe she had a whole operation going. Maybe she was feeding a drug habit or gambling addiction. Whatever it was, he would catch her red-handed. He would confront her with the evidence. And then he would fire her and make sure she never worked in Dallas again. He might even call the police and have her arrested for theft. That evening, Mathew pretended everything was normal. He worked in his office while Jessica played with the kids in the living room. He could hear them laughing, building a blanket fort, pretending they were explorers in a jungle. Lily's voice rang out with pure joy as she commanded her little brother to help her build the fort higher. Lucas giggled as he stacked pillows. For a moment, watching them through the doorway, Mathew almost felt guilty. Lily and Lucas loved Jessica. In just 3 weeks, she had become their safe place. They ran to her when they got hurt. They shared their secrets with her. They hugged her goodnight. If he fired her, they would be heartbroken. But betrayal was betrayal. He couldn't let a thief live in his house, no matter how much his kids liked her. At 6 o'clock, Jessica said goodbye to the children. She hugged them both tightly and promised to see them tomorrow. Lily made her promise 3 times. Lucas didn't want to let go. "I'll be back before you know it," Jessica said warmly, kissing the top of his head. Mathew watched from the shadows as she went to the kitchen. He had deliberately left extra food out on the counter as a test. Expensive items, organic almond butter, imported pasta, premium protein powder. He wanted to see if she would take the bait. She did. Jessica packed the items into her bag, along with some canned soup and vegetables from the pantry. She zipped it closed, adjusted the heavy strap on her shoulder, and headed for the back door. The moment she left, Mathew rushed to his garage and got into his black Mercedes SUV. He pulled out quietly, keeping his headlights off until he was a block away. Then he followed her. Jessica walked 3 blocks to the bus stop. She didn't call an Uber or a taxi. She didn't have anyone pick her up in a car. She took the public bus. Mathew watched from across the street as she sat down by the window with the heavy bag on her lap. She looked exhausted. Her shoulders sagged. Her eyes stared out the window with a distant, sad expression. Mathew followed that bus for 45 minutes, through Highland Park with its mansions and perfectly manicured lawns, through downtown Dallas with its skyscrapers and busy streets, past the Arts District with its museums and theaters, into East Dallas where the neighborhoods changed. The houses here were small, some had peeling paint. The streets were cracked and full of potholes. This was a part of the city where people struggled to make ends meet. The bus stopped, and Jessica got off. Mathew parked his Mercedes a block away and followed her on foot. He felt ridiculous stalking his own employee through the streets like some kind of private detective, but he needed answers. He needed to know what she was doing with his food. His heart was pounding. He expected her to go to a house, maybe meet an accomplice, maybe sell the food to someone, maybe she had a black market operation going where she stole from rich families and sold groceries to people for cheap. His mind raced with possibilities. None of them were good. But then Jessica stopped in front of a large, plain building. It was 5 stories tall, made of concrete and glass, nothing fancy, nothing suspicious. A sign out front read, St. Michael's Long-Term Care Facility. Mathew froze on the sidewalk. A hospital? What was she doing at a hospital? Thieves don't go to hospitals. Criminals don't visit care facilities. Nothing made sense. Maybe she was visiting someone before going to sell the food. Maybe this was a cover. Maybe she worked here part-time and was stealing from multiple places. Jessica walked through the automatic doors, and after a moment of hesitation, Mathew followed. The lobby was quiet and sterile. It smelled like disinfectant and sadness. A receptionist sat behind a desk, typing on a computer, but didn't notice him. Mathew stayed near the entrance, watching as Jessica approached a nurse at the information desk. The nurse smiled at her warmly, clearly recognizing her. She handed Jessica a visitor badge without asking for identification. They chatted for a moment like old friends. Then Jessica headed down a long hallway, her heavy bag still slung over her shoulder. Mathew kept his distance, staying far enough behind that she wouldn't notice him, but close enough that he wouldn't lose her. His expensive leather shoes squeaked on the polished floor. He felt out of place in his designer suit among the nurses in scrubs and families in casual clothes. Jessica stopped at room 12B. She knocked softly on the door, then pushed it open and disappeared inside. Mathew's heart was hammering now. He crept closer and looked through the small rectangular window in the door. What he saw made his breath catch in his throat. Inside the room, there was a man lying in a hospital bed. He was thin and frail, his face covered in old scars that looked like burn marks. His skin had the waxy, unnatural texture of someone who had been through severe trauma. Machines surrounded him. A heart monitor beeped steadily. An IV drip fed fluids into his arm. A ventilator hissed softly, helping him breathe. The man's eyes were closed. He wasn't moving. He was in a coma. Jessica sat down in the chair beside the bed and took the man's scarred hand in hers. Tears were already streaming down her face. "Hey, Papa," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm sorry I'm late. Work ran a little long today, but I brought your favorites." Mathew felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. Papa, this was her father. He watched through the window as Jessica began unpacking the bag. She took out containers of food, but it wasn't regular food. Everything had been blended into a smooth puree. She carefully prepared the portions and began feeding them into a tube that was connected to the man's stomach. A feeding tube. The food wasn't stolen. It was for her father, a man who couldn't eat on his own. "I got the job, Papa," Jessica said through her tears. "The one I told you about, the billionaire with the 2 kids, Mr. Richard. They're such sweet children. Lily reminds me of how I used to follow you around when I was little. And Lucas has your smile, even though he's not related to us. He just has that same kind, gentle spirit you always had." Mathew's hand gripped the doorframe. His knuckles turned white. He felt like the floor was tilting beneath him. "I know you can't hear me," Jessica continued, her voice shaking with emotion. "I know the doctors say you might never wake up. They say the damage to your brain is too severe. But I have to believe you're still in there somewhere, Papa. I have to believe you know I'm here, because you're a hero. You've always been a hero." Mathew's heart stopped. Every muscle in his body went rigid. "You saved that woman's life 3 years ago in California," Jessica said, gently stroking her father's scarred hand. "You pulled her from that burning car. The doctors told me the fire was so intense, they're amazed you survived at all. You inhaled all that toxic smoke. You got those terrible burns on your arms and chest. But you didn't stop. You kept going back into the flames until you got her out." Mathew stumbled backward. His vision blurred. The hallway started spinning. His mind raced back to that horrible day 3 years ago, the hospital in California, the beeping machines, Catherine's hand going cold in his, the doctor pulling him aside and explaining what had happened. A paramedic pulled your wife from the vehicle just before it exploded. He saved her life. Without him, she would have died in the fire. He gave you a chance to say goodbye. Mathew had never learned that paramedic's name. He had been too consumed by grief to ask, too shattered to think about anything except the fact that his wife was gone, too broken to function. The hospital staff had told him the paramedic was being treated for smoke inhalation and burns, but Mathew never followed up. He never said thank you. He never acknowledged the man who had risked everything to give him 10 final minutes with the love of his life. And now, 3 years later, he was standing in a hallway in Dallas, discovering that the man who saved his wife was lying in a coma in room 12B, and the woman he had accused of being a thief was that hero's daughter. Even though she didn't make it, Jessica continued inside the room. You gave her husband a chance to say goodbye. The newspaper article said he was able to be with her in her final moments because of you. That's what heroes do, Papa. They sacrifice everything for strangers. Mathew's legs gave out. He pressed his back against the wall and slid down to the floor. His chest felt like it was caving in. He couldn't breathe. Tears poured down his face. He covered his mouth with his hand to keep from sobbing out loud. The doctors say your lungs are too damaged. Jessica's voice drifted from the room. The smoke you inhaled destroyed so much tissue. The burns caused infections that attacked your whole body. You've been in this coma for 2 years now, and they say the chances of you waking up are less than 5%. But I'm not giving up, Papa. I will never give up on you. Mathew heard her crying now, her sobs mixing with her words. I work every day to pay for your care, she said. The insurance only covers part of it. This facility costs $3,000 a month. The medications cost another $1,000. The special nutritional formula for your feeding tube is $500. I work for Mr. Richard during the day. Then I work at a diner 3 nights a week. I clean houses on weekends. Every dollar I make goes to keeping you here, Papa. Every single dollar. Mathew felt like he was going to be sick. She was working herself to death to pay for her father's care. The father who had saved Catherine. The father who had given Mathew the most precious gift imaginable, time to say goodbye to his wife. I can't afford much food for myself, Jessica admitted. So sometimes I take leftovers from Mr. Richard's kitchen. I know it's wrong, Papa. I know I shouldn't do it. But I blend it up for your feeding tube because the special formula is so expensive. I'm so sorry. I know you taught me better than that. You taught me to never take what isn't mine. But I'm just so tired, Papa. I'm so tired, and I don't know what else to do. She broke down completely then, laying her head on the bed beside her father's motionless body, sobbing like a child. The sound of her grief echoed into the hallway where Mathew sat on the cold floor, tears streaming down his own face. Mathew Richard, the billionaire who trusted no one, had just discovered the truth. The woman he thought was a criminal was actually working 3 jobs to save the man who had saved his wife. The food she was taking wasn't being stolen for profit or greed. It was being blended into nutrition for a hero who lay dying in a hospital bed. She wasn't a thief. She was a daughter desperately trying to keep her father alive. And Mathew had been about to destroy her. He sat in that hallway for a long time, listening to Jessica talk to her father. She told him about her day, about Lily and Lucas, about the funny thing Lucas had said at breakfast, about how Lily had drawn a picture of a butterfly. She talked about the weather, about a book she was reading, about memories from her childhood when Jose Martins was healthy and strong and would carry her on his shoulders through the park. 30 minutes later, Jessica finally came out of the room. She was wiping her eyes with a tissue when she saw Mathew sitting on the floor in the hallway. She nearly jumped out of her skin. Mr. Richard, she gasped, what are you doing here? How did you? Mathew stood up slowly. His legs felt weak. His expensive suit was wrinkled from sitting on the floor. His eyes were red from crying. I followed you, he said, his voice hoarse and raw. I thought you were stealing from me. Jessica's face crumpled like paper. She looked down at her feet, shame washing over her features. I'm so sorry, she said, her voice shaking. I should have asked permission. I know I was wrong. I just couldn't afford enough food for him on my salary, and I thought maybe if I took some leftovers, just the things that would go bad anyway, it wouldn't be so terrible. But I know that's not an excuse. I'm a thief. You should fire me. You should call the police. I deserve it." "Stop," Mathew interrupted, his voice thick with emotion that threatened to choke him. "Just stop talking." Silence filled the hallway. Only the distant beeping of medical equipment and the soft hiss of ventilators could be heard. A nurse walked past them, gave them a curious look, and kept going. "Your father," Mathew said, and his voice cracked. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath before continuing. "Your father is the one who pulled my wife from the car." Jessica's eyes went wide. The tissue fell from her hand. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. "What?" she finally whispered. 3 years ago, California, the accident on Highway 101, he saved her. He pulled her from the burning car. He gave me 10 minutes to say goodbye to my wife. 10 minutes I wouldn't have had if he hadn't risked his life. Jessica's knees buckled. She grabbed onto the wall for support. Her face had gone completely pale. "I didn't know it was your wife," she said, and now she was crying too. "I swear to God, Mr. Richard, I didn't know. I saw the job posting online. I applied because I needed the money for Papa's care. When I got the interview and saw you had kids, I just thought I could help them. I didn't realize. I never connected. Oh my God." Her whole body was shaking now. Mathew stepped forward and pulled her into a hug. It was awkward at first. He hadn't hugged anyone except his children in 3 years. But then Jessica broke down completely, sobbing into his shoulder, and Mathew held her tightly. Two broken people, both destroyed by the same tragedy, both carrying unbearable pain, finally seeing each other clearly for the first time. "I'm so sorry," Jessica kept saying over and over. "I'm so sorry for your loss. I'm so sorry for taking the food. I'm so sorry." "No," Mathew said firmly, pulling back to look at her tear-stained face. "I'm the one who's sorry. Your father is a hero. He gave me the most precious gift anyone could give, and I never even thanked him. I never found out his name. I was so consumed by my grief that I didn't think about the man who saved her. And now here he is, and I." He couldn't finish the sentence. He looked at the door to room 12B, where Jose Martins lay in a coma, and felt a tidal wave of guilt and gratitude crash over him. "How long has he been here?" Mathew asked. 2 years, Jessica said, wiping her eyes. "After the accident in California, he was hospitalized for 6 months. The burns got infected. He had 4 surgeries, then he developed pneumonia from the lung damage. He went into a coma and never woke up. I moved him here to Dallas so I could be close to him. I visit him every single day." "Every day?" Mathew asked. "Every single day," Jessica confirmed. "I work my shift with your children, then I take the bus here. I spend an hour with him, I feed him, I talk to him, I hold his hand. Then I go home, sleep for a few hours, and do it all over again. On my days off, I work at the diner or clean houses to pay his bills." Mathew felt like his heart was being ripped out of his chest. This woman was working herself into the ground to save her father. The same father who had worked himself into a coma to save Catherine. "That ends today," Mathew said firmly. "What?" Jessica looked confused. "All of it, the 3 jobs, the bus rides, the struggling to pay his bills, it ends today." "Mr. Richard, I don't understand." Mathew took a deep breath. "Come with me." He walked into room 12B. Jessica followed hesitantly. Mathew stood at the foot of Jose Martin's bed and looked at the man who had saved his wife. The scars, the ventilator, the feeding tube, the machines keeping him alive. "This man," Mathew said, his voice steady now, "gave me a gift I can never repay, but I'm going to try." He pulled out his phone and made a call. It was after 7 p.m., but the person on the other end answered immediately. "Dr. Patel, this is Mathew Richard. I need you to assemble the best medical team in Dallas. Neurologists, pulmonologists, rehabilitation specialists, the best of the best. I need them at St. Michael's long-term care facility tomorrow morning. I don't care what it costs. I don't care if you have to fly people in from other states. Make it happen." He hung up and made another call. this time to a hospital administrator he knew from a charity board. I need a private wing set up, state-of-the-art equipment, 24-hour care, whatever it takes. I'm moving a patient. His name is Jose Martins. I want him to have the best care money can buy. Jessica was staring at him, her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Mathew made 6 more calls, to doctors, to medical supply companies, to specialists. By the time he finished, he had assembled a team that would make most hospitals jealous. Mr. Richard, Jessica finally said when he put his phone away, I can't let you do this. I can't accept. You're not accepting anything, Mathew interrupted gently. I owe your father my life, more than my life. He gave me a chance to say goodbye to the woman I loved more than anything in this world. There is no amount of money that can repay that, but I can make sure he gets the care he deserves. I can make sure you don't have to work yourself to death trying to save him. Please, let me do this. Jessica collapsed into the chair beside her father's bed and cried. She cried for her father. She cried for relief. She cried because for the first time in 2 years, she wasn't alone in this fight. Mathew placed a hand on her shoulder. We're going to save him, he promised, together. Within 1 week, everything changed. Jose Martins was moved to a private wing of the best hospital in Dallas. The room was 3 times the size of his old one, with windows that let in natural light. The medical equipment was cutting edge. Mathew hired a team of 5 specialists who consulted on Jose's case daily. Dr. Rachel Chen, one of the top neurologists in the country, flew in from Boston to examine him. Dr. Marcus Thompson, a pulmonologist who had pioneered new treatments for smoke inhalation injuries, came from Johns Hopkins. Physical therapists, occupational therapists, speech therapists, all stood ready for the moment Jose woke up. If he woke up, the doctors were honest with Jessica. They explained that the damage to Jose's brain was severe. The lack of oxygen during the fire had caused widespread injury. The chances of him waking up were still very small, but they were trying everything: experimental medications, new therapies, cutting-edge procedures. Jessica spent every moment she could at the hospital. Mathew gave her time off work, with full pay, to be with her father. He told her the job would be waiting for her when she was ready to come back, but her focus needed to be on Jose. Mathew visited too. Sometimes he would sit in the room and talk to Jose, even though the man couldn't hear him. I never got to thank you, Mathew said one afternoon, sitting in the chair beside Jose's bed. You gave me something I'll treasure for the rest of my life. You gave me a chance to tell Catherine I loved her, to hold her hand, to kiss her goodbye. Because of you, I didn't have to live with the regret of not being there. You're a hero, Jose, a real hero. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months. Jessica refused to give up hope. She read books to her father. She played his favorite music. She showed him photos on her phone. She told him stories. She prayed. 6 months after Jose was moved to the new facility, something incredible happened. It was a Tuesday morning. Jessica was sitting beside the bed, reading aloud from a book about mountain climbing that her father used to love. She heard a sound, a soft groan. She looked up. Jose's eyes were fluttering. Papa, she said, dropping the book. Her heart started racing. His eyes opened slowly. They were unfocused at first, confused, but then they found her face. Papa, Jessica screamed. She pressed the call button for the nurses. Can you hear me? Papa, it's me, it's Jessica. Jose's lips moved. His voice was barely a whisper, rough from years of not being used. Mija, he said. It was just one word, but it was the most beautiful word Jessica had ever heard. She collapsed onto his chest, sobbing with joy. Within minutes, the room filled with doctors and nurses. They examined Jose, checked his vitals, ran tests. His brain activity was showing signs of consciousness. His motor responses were weak but present. It was a miracle. Mathew got the call an hour later. He was in a business meeting but dropped everything and drove straight to the hospital. When he walked into the room and saw Jose awake, sitting up slightly in bed, he felt tears spring to his eyes. Jose looked at him with weak but aware eyes. You're the husband, Jose said quietly, Catherine's husband. Mathew nodded, unable to speak. I'm sorry I couldn't save her, Jose said, and tears rolled down his scarred cheeks. Mathew walked to the bed and took Jose's hand. You did save her. You gave me a chance to say goodbye. You gave me peace. Thank you. Thank you for risking your life for my family. The two men sat there, both crying, both understanding the weight of what they shared. Recovery was slow. Jose had to relearn how to walk, how to feed himself, how to speak in full sentences, but he was alive, he was awake, and every day he got a little bit stronger. Jessica quit her job at the diner. She quit cleaning houses. Mathew insisted on paying for everything, not just Jose's medical care, but Jessica's living expenses too. He set up a trust fund for her future. He gave her a salary for being his children's nanny that was triple what he had been paying before. More than that, he gave her family. 1 year later, everything had transformed. Jose Martins lived in the guest house on Mathew's property. It was a beautiful space, fully accessible for his wheelchair, with a view of the garden. He still needed physical therapy and occasional medical care, but he was alive and conscious and grateful. Jessica no longer worked as just a nanny. She was family. Lily and Lucas called her Aunt Jessica. She had dinner with them every night. She came to school events. She celebrated holidays with them. On a sunny Saturday afternoon, they all gathered in the backyard for a barbecue. Jose sat in his wheelchair at the patio table, watching Lily and Lucas play tag on the grass. He was laughing, actually laughing, something he hadn't done in years. Mathew stood at the grill flipping burgers. He was smiling, a real, genuine smile. Jessica was setting the table, teasing Lucas about his messy hair. You know, Jose said to Mathew, his voice still a bit rough but strong, I never thought pulling someone from a fire would lead to this. Mathew walked over and sat down beside him. You didn't just pull someone from a fire, you gave me a gift that day, you gave me closure, you gave me peace, you let me say goodbye. I'll spend the rest of my life being grateful for that. Jose shook his head slowly. You saved my daughter from a life of struggle. You gave me a second chance at life. I'd say we're even. We're not even, Mathew said firmly. We're family. At that moment, Lily ran over and climbed into Mathew's lap. She was laughing, her hair flying everywhere, her cheeks flushed from running. Daddy, can we have ice cream after dinner? She asked. Of course, sweetheart, Mathew said, kissing the top of her head. Lucas ran over too, followed by Jessica, who was pretending to chase him. Lucas hid behind Jose's wheelchair, giggling. Protect me, Mr. Jose, he yelled dramatically. Jose laughed and put his arm around the little boy. I've got you, buddy. They all sat together as the sun began to set, casting golden light across the backyard. The smell of burgers cooking mixed with the scent of flowers from the garden. The sound of children's laughter filled the air. For the first time in 3 years, Mathew's house felt like a home. Mathew looked around at everyone. At Jose, who had sacrificed his health to save a stranger. At Jessica, who had sacrificed everything to save her father. At Lily and Lucas, who were learning what it meant to be kind and compassionate from the people around them. He realized something profound in that moment. He had spent 3 years building walls, 3 years pushing people away, 3 years convinced that everyone would betray him, and in doing so, he had almost destroyed the one person who was trying to save him. Jessica Martins could have resented him. She could have been angry at the world for what happened to her father. She could have become bitter and cold. Instead, she chose to pour love into 2 children who had lost their mother. She chose to work 3 jobs to keep her father alive. She chose kindness even when life had been cruel to her. That evening, after dinner was finished and the kids were in bed, Mathew and Jessica sat on the porch together. Jose had gone to the guest house to rest. The night was quiet except for the sound of crickets. Thank you, Jessica said softly, for everything you've done, for my father, for me. I don't know how to repay you. You already have, Mathew said. You brought life back into this house. You taught my children how to laugh again. You showed me that not everyone is out to hurt me, that some people are genuinely good. Jessica smiled. Your wife would be proud of the man you've become. Mathew felt tears prick his eyes, but they were good tears. Healing tears, I hope so. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out one by one in the Texas sky. Mathew Richard had learned the hardest lesson of his life, that the people who seem the most suspicious might just be the ones carrying the heaviest burdens, that sometimes the person you're ready to destroy is actually the one sent to save you, that paranoia and fear can make you blind to the goodness that's right in front of you. He had learned that kindness isn't weakness, that trust isn't foolish, that opening your heart is terrifying but necessary, and that miracles happen when you choose love over fear. The next morning, Mathew established the Catherine and Jose Foundation. It was dedicated to helping first responders and their families. Paramedics, firefighters, police officers who were injured in the line of duty would receive medical care, financial support, and resources for their families. No one would have to work 3 jobs to keep a hero alive. No one would have to steal food to feed someone they loved. Jessica became the director of the foundation. She poured her heart into it, making sure every family that needed help received it. The foundation grew quickly, helping hundreds of families across Texas and eventually expanding nationwide. Jose recovered enough to give speeches at fundraising events. He would tell his story, how he pulled a woman from a burning car not knowing it would change his life forever, how his daughter never gave up on him, how stranger became family. People were moved to tears. Donations poured in. Lily and Lucas grew up surrounded by love. They learned what it meant to help others. They volunteered at the foundation. They visited hospitals with their father to meet first responders. They grew into compassionate, kind, generous young people. Years later, when people asked Mathew Richard about the turning point in his life, he always told them the same story. The story of a nanny he thought was a thief. The story of a paramedic who saved his wife. The story of a daughter who never gave up. The story of how suspicion almost cost him everything and how love saved him in the end. Because that's what heroes do. They save people even when it costs them everything. And sometimes, if you're very lucky and very willing to open your heart, someone saves you back. If this story touched your heart, if it made you believe in second chances and the goodness of people, I want you to do something for me. Hit that like button right now. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. And comment below one more time. Tell me what time it is where you are right now. Tell me where you're watching from. Let's see how far this message of hope and redemption can spread around the world. Because we all need reminders that love is stronger than fear, that heroes walk among us, and that it's never too late to do the right thing. Subscribe for more stories that will restore your faith in humanity. I'll see you in the next one.